The HOA, still reeling from their repeated failures, attempted yet another overreach, posting a notice to remove me from my pond property. Their arrogance was staggering. They assumed that a public declaration, backed by the weight of their organization, could override my rights and intimidate me into compliance. But, as always, they had failed to understand the depth of my preparation, both legal and strategic. Rather than reacting with panic or fear, I seized the moment to assert complete control. I posted private terrain signs across the entire pond property, clearly marking boundaries and establishing legal notice to anyone, including the HOA, that access without consent was prohibited. Every sign was strategically placed at entry points, along the shoreline, and at visible perimeters, ensuring that trespassers could be held accountable. The notices were not just symbolic. They carried legal weight, backed by documented property ownership, prior communications, and local regulations. I then enhanced the security infrastructure around the pond. Surveillance cameras were recalibrated to cover blind spots. Automated alerts were integrated to monitor any intrusion attempts, and controlled access points were reinforced. Every entry route was monitored, every approach documented, and every potential violation anticipated. The HOA had attempted to exert control through authority and intimidation, but now the property was firmly under my control, both physically and legally. Karen's reaction was immediate and dramatic. She stormed onto the property, gesturing and shouting, attempting to intimidate me with her usual theatrics. But her attempts were futile. She had underestimated not only my legal knowledge but also the strategic measures I had implemented. Every action she took was recorded, time-stamped, and logged, adding to a growing dossier of evidence of harassment, overreach, and repeated violations. This act of posting private terrain also served as a preventative measure. By clearly marking boundaries and documenting legal notice, any future attempt by the HOA or its members to enter or interfere would now carry serious legal consequences. Karen and her allies could no longer claim ignorance or misunderstanding. They had been explicitly warned, legally documented, and physically restricted from access. The psychological impact on the HOA and Karen was significant. Their repeated attempts at coercion and intimidation were rendered ineffective, visible to neighbors and the wider community, and increasingly absurd. Karen's credibility continued to decline as her impulsive actions contrasted sharply with my calm, deliberate, and legally supported strategy. Each failed maneuver further highlighted her lack of foresight and understanding. In the following weeks, I monitored the property closely. Any movement from the HOA, any attempt to bypass the boundaries, was anticipated and neutralized. The signs, surveillance, and access control served as both deterrence and evidence, ensuring that the HOA could not regain any influence over the pond property. Karen's attempts to manipulate or coerce me had become counterproductive, leaving her exposed to legal liability and public scrutiny. By the conclusion of this episode, the message was unmistakable. The pond was private, under my full control, and any attempts to interfere would be met with legal consequences, tactical readiness, and clear documentation. Karen and the HOA had repeatedly overestimated their power and underestimated my preparation, and this act of asserting private terrain solidified the reality that my authority was absolute. This confrontation was more than just about signage or property boundaries. It was about establishing dominance, reinforcing legal authority, and demonstrating that preparation, foresight, and strategic action could neutralize even the most persistent aggressor. Karen had learned, once again, that attempts at intimidation would only reinforce my position, secure my property, and expose her reckless overreach to everyone who witnessed it.